Hello, I'm Dylan.
And I'm Keon.
And this is Trust Your Doctor, that podcast where if we judge this on its cover, we would judge it way higher than we actually did. This week we read Terrorformer and the Swords of Kali.
Written by Robbie Morrison.
Let's see. The art was done by Dave Taylor and coloring was done by Hi-Fi and Luis Guerrero.
And don't forget the letterers who are credited not on the cover, but on the interior of the book.
If they're not credited on the cover, did they really do any work?
Yes. Then again, we don't read, the entire credits of the TV episodes.
I think that's the page.
Yeah. The letterers were Richard Starkings and Comicraft's Jimmy Betancourt. Editor Andrew James, assistant editor Kristen Murray, designer Rob Farmer.
That's enough. That's good. Yep.
Yeah. So the reason we say we would judge, these comics more highly on the cover is that the cover art was done by a different person.
Yeah, the cover art of the book was done by Alice X, because I was thinking of the X already. Alice X Zhang.
And it's a much more realistic and true to life interpretation of the characters.
She's a really good artist. I like her artwork a lot. She did the artwork for the Series 9 Steelbook, I believe, as well. The Blu-ray Steelbook for the BBC. She also did that one of the other covers that I think they crappily cropped to make the copyright page.
Yeah.
So
yeah, so maybe we should explain why, or reiterate why we decided to read these comics.
Well, we didn't want to do what we did for the 11th Doctor and go, shit, we didn't do anything for the retrospective.
Yeah, because we find that to be, boring. So we want to take this episode to look back on the 12th Doctor, but we also want to have something to ground us.
Well, the retrospectives are also our way of delving into other mediums, like we did in audio for the 10th Doctor. We did the Doctor Who annual for the 9th Doctor.
Yeah.
And again, nothing for the 11th Doctor because that kind of snuck up on us and all of a sudden it was there.
Well, what did we did Spiral Scratch for the 6th Doctor. That was our first attempt at doing something else for the retrospective. But then what did we do for 7? Nothing?
We might not have done anything for 7.
We looked back at Spiral Scratch and were like, do we really want to go through that again?
Well, also part of the reason why we did Spiral Scratch was because it was kind of like a, quote, final story, unquote, for the 6th Doctor. And even in that capacity, it wasn't very good.
No. And that's why we decided to take these random, comic stories and judge them based on whether or not they're a proper send-off for the 12th Doctor. Which they're not.
Is that what we were judging them on? I was just judging them on if they were a satisfying 12th Doctor story, and even still, about 50% of this book was not.
Yeah. So why don't we just jump into the plot, which won't take too long because it's pretty simplistic for both stories.
Well, why don't I just say right off the bat, I find Swords of Kali far superior to Terrorformer. Yeah,
I do as well, and that's both a result of the story and also the fact that they got Luis Guerrero to do the coloration instead of Hi-Fi.
Hi-Fi is a studio, I think, instead of just one guy who goes by Hi-Fi, I think.
Well, let's read the little blurb in the back again.
Oh boy.
Hi-Fi Color Design was founded in 1998 by Brian and Christy Miller and provides digital color for comic books, toys, video games, and animation, and tutorials on color through masterdigitalcolor.com.
Can't wait to see what a video game colorized by Hi-Fi would look like.
So improper punctuation and grammar here in this little blurb, as there was, this is the biographies page at the end, so we got Robbie Morrison, Dave Taylor, etc., all the people involved in making this, comic, and I'll just say right off the bat that was one of my pet peeves about this entire book, but it's most evident on the biographies page, is that, the punctuation and the grammar and all of that is just painful.
Well, that's pretty much Robbie Morrison's fault, and I didn't even, notice, so...
It's most evident on the biographies page, where there's just commas, in the middle of words, and no, I'm just kidding. Might as well be, with how crazy they went with the commas and just improper
They want to
grammar.
make sure you're taking a break halfway through your sentence. They wanted to really punctuate it like the 12th Doctor's speech, I guess.
Like an actor who dwells on their lines and steps on everyone else's. Anyway, you want to just jump into the plot?
Yeah, so Terrorformer. Terrorformer kind of sets up what looked like was going to be some sort of like running arc, I guess, for these comics with the introduction of the Hyperions.
Well, I imagined it as like, because we only read the first two, and this isn't a greater series than that, greater in terms of number of issues, not quality. So I imagine like in one of the final issues, they might bring back the Hyperions or whatever.
Well, in one of the final issues of, quote, year one, unquote, there's a storyline called the Hyperion Empire, so...
Yeah, and they might even do like not a retcon thing, but like, haha, like the Hyperions were controlling like all the villains that you've read about so far type thing. Would be a little weird if they were controlling Kali, but...
Well, they mentioned the the Doctor mentions the Hyperion War and Swords of Kali.
Right, how Kali was sort of defeated by them.
Well, so the story of the first story, a little circular there, is that the Doctor's taking Clara to ski on this ice planet, and the ice planet is now a tropical planet because of the richest guy to literally ever live.
Yeah, his name is what was it? Something Dollar. I didn't write down his first name, unfortunately.
Well, the gist of it is that he has a sherbet ton of money.
Wow.
And he turns this ice planet into a tropical jungle planet through terraforming.
Right. His name's Kano Dollar, the head of Dollar Intergalactic, the hero we need but don't deserve.
He's as blatantly named as William Bank, the main villain of Ocean's 13.
Well, yeah, so the planet's name is Isen 6 or Isen V or Isen V or Isen 6.
In my head, I pronounced it as Eisen because I was just thinking of Lord of the Rings with Isengard.
But sort of another element to this backstory is that Kano Dollar is holding his wedding on this planet. He's marrying, Princess Thana, the Gothgalka horde, set to be the wedding of the millennium. Just reading this like ad copy style panel from the comic. So the Doctor and Clara are there, and the Doctor is obviously very suspicious about the fact that there's tropical foliage on this ice world. And we also, we skipped the sort of beginning thing where a robot named Clive murders a guy.
Yeah, well, he immediately gets killed, so that's why we skipped it. Yeah. Because the guy's just dead. Anyway, the terraforming, robot has accidentally activated this Hyperion sleeping chamber, and then we get this weird, flashback in the middle of the comic where we find out that the Time Lords ganged up with all the other strongest species in the universe.
Well, the backstory of the Hyperions is that they're living suns, and that they brought benevolence
Suns, S-U-N.
Yeah, benevolence and prosperity, to various planets across the galaxy. But when it was their time to die, they became malevolent, and they don't really detail the reasoning behind that. It just happened.
They were just afraid of dying, so they decided the best way to stop dying was to kill literally everyone. I forgot that the part of this alliance was the Silurians and the Sontarans.
Well, the Hyperions decided to go into a state of suspended animation and just leech off the power of other worlds.
Yeah, so they thought they destroyed all of the Hyperions, but some of them, there were legends that some of them escaped, and now they found one. And
right, sort of in this underground area that they travel to. So it's the Doctor and Clara, and then the sort of quote unquote serial specific characters who are all members of Kano's empire.
And they were all completely trivial and insignificant. And they also all immediately just Dollar dies. Dollar eats it.
Well, we think, because once the Hyperion starts attacking, they go into this full-scale battle, and Kano flees his wedding. Yeah, they literally interrupt the wedding. He flees, and you think he gets shot down because he's fleeing in like a spacecraft. But it turns out, you find out at the end that he actually lived, and he gets attacked by the monkeys that Clara, who stole Clara's hat at the beginning, who she calls skunkies because they look kind of like a cross between a skunk and a monkey.
Yep. And then the Doctor just defeats the Hyperion by like freezing it, basically.
Yeah, he uses, I believe it was like an ice tornado that,
Yeah.
that I guess they,
Yeah, captured, I guess.
yeah, got to do something with all that snow.
And it freezes the Hyperion, and they're like, yeah, cool. But then in the final panel, we see a Hyperion sleeping chamber on Neptune awakening.
Yeah,
Hyperios rises.
right, and I didn't like really even skim through the book before reading it, so I thought the whole thing was going to be Terrorformer.
Yeah, it's kind of weird that they just printed Terrorformer on the cover, even though it's less than 50% of the book.
Yeah. So then we get the Swords of Kali, and I was like, okay, this is going to be another story, but at the end, it's going to be revealed that the Hyperions were behind the whole entire plot. But no, not really. But I guess now, as we transition into talking about the Swords of Kali, we can talk about the art, because there's a noticeable uptick in quality when we get to the Swords of Kali, because, again, they switched from hi-fi design or whatever to Luis Guerrero.
Right. The coloring of the second story is much more detailed.
I think it's more realistic. Like, it uses a lot of, like, there's noticeable, like, lighting, and it's, like, less flat. So it looks more realistic. And, I mean, I'm not a big comic books person, obviously. I don't really read comics at all, but, like...
Neither do I.
I thought it was... I mean, when you get to, like, at the end where you get those close-ups on, like, Kali's glowing green eyes, like, that was pretty cool, I thought.
Yeah, all the Kali scenes were really cool. All the scenes in the temple where they're fighting were pretty cool, too.
Yeah. So the Swords of Kali is definitely a more compelling story. Because it's just a lot more character-driven.
Well, the basic premise is that the Doctor gets a phone call. He's like... Well, we actually start, like, in medias res, where the Doctor's like... He's being held captive, or being literally held by some monster, and then some girl busts into the room, and the Doctor's like, so are you just going to shoot it, or are you just going to stand there? And then we get the title page, the title sequence, I guess, and then we kind of cut back to the Doctor and Clara with Leonardo da Vinci, and I guess Clara is the model for the Mona Lisa now, I guess that's canon. I guess that's a thing. We only see him painting one Mona Lisa, though, so you have to wonder what happens to the 6 fakes.
Dan Brown, get on that.
This is a fake.
But we do get a little, like, pre-sequence where we're introduced to... God, what was her name? I remember every other character's name except her.
I should have taken notes.
Darn it. I did take notes, I didn't write her name down. Oh, right. Her name was Ronnie Julka, which was so weird that they named her Ronnie.
Maybe she is the Ronnie.
Maybe. I guess that's what I'd like to think. So we get a little pre-sequence with her where she saves, like, a group of travelers in 1825 India from some demons.
Well, that's when she busts in with the Doctor, and he's like,
yeah,
hey.
What's up? So, the Doctor gets a call from his old friend, Tiger Maratha.
Yes, his old friend who we've never met before.
And Tiger Maratha lives in, like, 23-something.
Yeah.
In Mumbai, India.
He was a friend of the Fourth Doctor, apparently, because there's a picture of the two of them on the wall. There's weird Fourth Doctor cameos all throughout this story. Maybe that's why it's better.
But once the Doctor and Clara actually get to, his apartment or whatever, he dies.
Yeah, like right before they arrive.
Right.
The Doctor's like, damn, that sucks.
And then, weirdly, his daughter comes into the room, his daughter Priyanka, and shows absolutely no emotion towards her father's death.
She basically yells at the Doctor, and he's like, hey, I didn't kill him. And she's like, yeah, you did. And he's like, you want a jelly baby? And she's like, oh, you're the Doctor. Nice. And she has like a flashback to the Fourth Doctor offering her jelly babies. Do we add this to the jelly baby count?
No, because it's in a comic and not a TV episode. Yeah, we weirdly flash back to the Doctor, like, giving candy to a child, like...
Well, when you put it like that...
You ever see that GIF of like this sketchy like warehouse in the middle of nowhere, and someone just painted like in huge letters on the wall outside Willy Wonka's chocolate factory
Yeah,
free
I have
candy?
actually, because I think you showed me that GIF before. You ever seen that GIF where that Russian guy just crawls into a hole in the ground and then that just the GIF ends and you're like, man, I wonder where he went. It's just a hole that's like exactly body shaped and he just crawls in and disappears. You're like, damn.
How do you know he's Russian? I think we've talked about this before actually, but how do you know he's Russian?
I don't know. It was posted to the subreddit A Normal Day in Russia, so I'm just assuming, I guess. It's like that comic story, that really horrifying comic story where this like mountain... There's like an earthquake, and then there's this mountain reveals like all these human-shaped holes. It's like this is a horror story, and then like people who go there, they like find their hole, and then they're like compelled to go into their hole, and then they just like they walk through their hole for eternity, and then in like 6 years or 5 years later, the scientists like find the other side of the hole, and it's all these like really spindly cracks, and the final panel is they look down the hole and it's all these like mutated, twisted people down the hole. Yeah, it's pretty terrifying. I'll see if I can find it for the show notes.
Speaking of people getting buried and having bad stuff happen to them in holes, check out Inevitable, a classic sci-fi podcast where we'll soon be reviewing Children of the Stones, which is a guy
like 2 weeks from now. So basically, the Doctor then decides he's going to figure out what's going on, and there's this shady guy who's like built this space station called Haven, sorry.
Yeah, I misread it as Heaven multiple times.
Yeah, so did I.
And this is the result of the hard work of the Cynthia family. Mm-hmm. A weirdly like Italian mob sounding like name. And also like in practice they are kind of like an weird alien like mafia family type thing. Because we get sort of all their backstories. They're all like very rich and powerful and famous for different things. And they were also behind Tiger's death.
Yeah. Because they control these demon beings that serve Kali.
Well, they are these demon beings that serve Kali as well.
Yeah.
And sort of the Tiger's backstory is that he was an archaeologist, an Indiana Jones style archaeologist apparently. He was commissioned by...
very Temple of Doom, this whole story.
Yeah, he was commissioned by the Cynthia family to find the 4 swords of Kali to aid in her resurrection.
Although he doesn't know that last part. He doesn't know it's to aid in the resurrection. He's just looking for the swords.
So he finds 3 of the swords. He faces off against like traps, but also like robots. And he gives them 3 of the swords, but they were never able to find the 4th one.
He finds where the 4th one was, and he gets to the temple and it's gone. And he just finds 2 smoldering corpses, and he's like, that's kind of weird and it sucks.
Right.
But they don't believe that he couldn't find it, so they kill him.
The timeline of this was a little weird to me because in the flashback scene, he looks way younger. Even when he goes to the temple where he finds the 4th sword, he looks way younger. So did they just like wait 30 years to kill him?
I guess they wanted to wait for the exact moment right before the Doctor shows up to kill him.
I guess. So the Doctor and Clara and Priyanka go back in time to the like Cynthia stronghold in 1825.
Well, they don't actually. They just go to the Cynthia stronghold now, and while they're there, the Doctor's like, there's some sort of weird time field. And while he's there, he teleports back in time because he like accidentally triggers it. So Clara and Priyanka still in modern day.
Oh.
The Doctor's in 1825.
I forgot about that. Yeah,
and that's how, when we get the scene from the start of the comic when he's like being held by that demon thing, and Ronnie shows up and shoots it.
Ronnie.
Anyway, Ronnie gives her backstory here where she's like, I fell in love with a woman and that's not allowed. And the Doctor's like, literally no one cares.
Well, I mean, she says like, you seem as if you don't care. And the Doctor says something along the lines of like, I accept, everything.
He basically just says like, yeah, I mean, you're allowed to love whoever you want, but also I'm trying not to die.
Well, he says, there were actually a few quotes from this that I actually liked, and there was one where he's like, I'm not too concerned about people loving each other. It's when people start hating each other that I like to jump in and
get involved and muck about.
Yeah, so her backstory was that her lover, who was also royalty, was like put to death because of this whole affair.
Right.
And now she wants revenge on the Cynthia family.
Because they were the ones who put her to death.
Right.
Although we find out later she was put to death because they considered her as a host for Kali. And
Yeah, they consider a lot of people hosts for Kali.
well, the Cynthia family captures Clara and Priyanka, and Priyanka is able to escape through the TARDIS, but Clara is not able to escape, and the TARDIS takes her being Priyanka, to the Doctor and Ronnie. And so they escape their demons in the TARDIS to the
Their
future,
inner demons.
where the main villain kind of is like, hey, I've got Clara, you're going to bring me the fourth sword or I'm going to kill Clara. And the Doctor's like, all right, I guess.
And the way they're going to do that is they're going to like put her near the engines of like a rocket that they're sending up and just launch the rocket.
Seems like an overly complicated way to kill her.
Because they're still, like, while all this is going on, they're still sending people up to Haven.
Yeah.
And the reason they're doing this, by the way, the reason they tell people they're doing this is because, like, the Earth is overcrowded and overpopulated and polluted beyond.
But the real reason is because they're going to use Haven to kill everyone. There's sacrifices to Kali.
Yeah. The way they do that, we'll get there in a minute, but the way they do that is actually somewhat humorous. So the Doctor and Priyanka and Ronnie go to find the fourth sword, which they do, but they're accompanied by two of the Cynthia family members.
The Doctor reveals the reason why Tiger couldn't find the fourth sword is because they had already taken it because they have a time machine.
Right.
And then the Doctor's like, and guess what he found? 2 smoldering Cynthia corpses. Ha ha!
So you think the Doctor's just going to kill them, but it's actually like the defense system that activates when you remove the sword.
Which were apparently programmed to kill whatever these demons are. But then to kill humans. So they're running away back to the TARDIS. Meanwhile, Kali has taken over Clara's body, and she's blue and has 4 arms now.
Right. It looks actually a little grotesque. Like, you know, you see those old, like, paintings from, like, India and stuff of like, you know, the, you know, deities with, like, 4 arms or, like, 8 arms or whatever. And, you know, they're stylized, they're abstracted, they're not too detailed. But, like, here you literally get, like, arms sprouting out of Kali's armpit. And you're like, okay, that's a little horrific.
Clara should have just kept the 4 arms. She should have just been 4-armed for the rest of her tenure after this.
Show up at Coal Hill. What? Nothing different.
Yeah, Clara's like really bitchy in the Terrorformer because the Doctor's like, yeah, they're all calling you names, and she's like, I'm the cool teacher though. I'm not the mean teacher, the one they call names. I'm the cool teacher. They're supposed to like me. And the Doctor's like, I literally don't care.
If I remember anything about Series 8,
Clara, it's pretty accurate.
No, I don't think she's the cool teacher that they all like. To be honest.
No, I agree. I don't think so.
Nor do I think Danny Pink is either.
No. No. Well, Danny Pink has war flashbacks every time one of the kids mentions war or soldiers or killing. And again, I call back to, since this is a retrospective, I call back to us discussing in Series 8 whether he really should be a teacher given that kind of trauma that he hasn't resolved.
You know, now that I think about it, remember how Ian and Barbara were science teachers and history, a science teacher and history teacher respectively? So Clara and Danny Pink really round out that, like, the 4 core subjects, with Clara being an English teacher and Danny being a math teacher.
Yeah, except Ian and Barbara probably were the cool teachers everybody liked.
Well, maybe Ian. I don't know about Barbara.
Well, Barbara was the history teacher, right? Yeah, Ian was the science teacher because he like talks to them about dimensions, and then Susan is like, you can't solve this without going to the 26th dimension, and Ian's like, what?
And then Barbara was like, I remember this period in history, and then the Doctor and Susan were always like, but there were also aliens, you know, mucking around in the background.
Yeah, basically the entirety of that, like, run was them telling Barbara, like, but actually there were aliens to everything she knows and holds dear.
Well, not all the historicals actually in that era had aliens. Like the
Reign of Terror didn't have aliens.
Reign of Terror didn't.
Didn't Reign of Terror have that guy throwing his gun though?
The gunfighters didn't have aliens.
Most of the historials didn't have aliens actually.
The historials.
That was like the premise of the historical.
Yeah.
So, the Aztecs. I want to watch the Aztecs again. I don't want to watch the massacre again.
6th anniversary coming up.
Why don't they
Apparently-
reanimate the massacre instead of things like Fury from the Deep?
Well, I don't think we ever actually said this on recording, so now that we're talking about it, very Pete Lambert on Twitter told me that the audio drama version of the massacre, narrated by Peter Purvis, is actually makes the story a lot better. And somehow I doubt that, and I doubted it when he told me that. But maybe we should try it.
I doubt it because I don't think there's anything there to make better. There's nothing there. That was the whole. The problem that we had with that story is that there's nothing there for 4 bloody episodes. There's nothing.
More like 6. I mean, I wouldn't count any.
Wasn't it only a 4-episode story?
I thought it was 6. I can't remember now.
I thought it was a 4-episode serial.
It'll be in the show notes.
Still don't know why they don't just reanimate that one, because everybody's like, I'm sure the visuals would make it so much better, and I want them to animate it just so that we can be like, no.
Prove people wrong.
Yeah. Although apparently everybody thought Enemy of the World sucked until they found those reels and animated that one episode. Apparently people thought that story sucked, and now people think it's a modern classic. But I read that on Twitter, so...
So it's probably not true.
Anyway, back to the story at hand. The Doctor basically fiddles with one of his sword, and he gives it to Kali, and then he's like, yep, I basically hid my sonic screwdriver, my Deus Ex Machina device, in the hilt of the sword. Meanwhile, Haven is crashing to the ground, and Priyanka has to, pilot it to save everyone.
That's how they designed Haven to kill everyone, just to get everyone on there and crash it into the Earth.
This is the part where the Doctor mentions the Hyperion War, because he's after the Hyperion War, the Time Lords basically destroyed all the other powerful species in the universe just in case. And he's like, wasn't really a bad idea, just was done in bad taste.
Flashback to all those times they mentioned the Time Lord no interference policy.
Flashback to all those times they mentioned how the Time Lords are megalomaniacal, tyrannical dictatorship. Flashback to all those other godly, powerful beings that I guess they missed, like Omega. And Morbius.
The Nestine consciousness.
The Nestine. The Axons.
The Animus.
The Animus, yeah. The Great Intelligence. Bring back the Great Intelligence. Oh, wait, we did bring back the Great Intelligence. Now bring back the Animus.
The Great Intelligence was brought back in the weirdest way possible. We were just yeah, remember the Great Intelligence? Yeah, they were behind this entire thing for 3 episodes.
It'd be great if Chris Chibnall just brought back the Animus. Chris Chibnall, the Celestial Toymaker. There's another godlike being the Time Lords missed. The Ambassadors of Death.
You know what would be actually more great is if Chris Chibnall and the writers of the Chris Chibnall era created villains on par with or surpassing classic show villains.
Just you wait for the pting. Another godlike, impenetrable, indestructible being.
I'm just
the
waiting
good old
for
pting.
I'm just waiting for the frog.
The Solitract? I think that's that wasn't even a villain, but I think that's a being on par with the the Celestial Toymaker in terms of just sheer genius.
Right.
Just kidding. I don't think the Celestial Toymaker was that genius.
So how they resolve all of this is, like you mentioned, the Doctor embeds a sonic screwdriver in the hilt of the sword, destroying Kali and returning Clara back to her senses. And Priyanka stops the crash.
Yeah. And then it ends. And there's sort of an implied something between Priyanka and Ronnie.
Right, they're sort of watching some fireworks at some sort of festival.
Ronnie gets to say goodbye to her lover because the Sonic releases all the dead from Kali, and she gets to talk one more time with the dead specter, I guess, of her lover.
Yeah,
who tells her to basically move on.
Yeah. So I don't know if you had any sort of topics to talk about, but that's actually kind of one that I wanted to touch on, which I kind of liked, is that this story was more, or Swords of Kali, I think in particular, was more like techno-mystical rather than like, your typical TV episode, which Doctor Who has always had fantasy elements and continues to have fantasy elements, but it sometimes feels like the TV series tries to explain away some of those, whereas this one was just like, yep, we're capturing souls.
I think that was more of a Moffat thing than a whole show as a whole thing, because like Morbius, when he came back, like the vampires in State of Decay were just like, they liked drinking blood. There wasn't like, and they needed the blood to survive. There wasn't like some technological reason why. But contrast that to like Vampires of Venice, where the vampires were like aliens who like weren't actually vampires. They just didn't go out in the daytime.
Yeah. Well, the vampires from State of Decay were also aliens.
I mean,
not on there, I guess.
But that's the thing. Like Kali, and this is also an alien.
Yeah. Well, it's always been like that, as we mentioned. Like, I can't even think of a single, at least in the TV show, I can't even think of a single time where it was been like, yep, here's a werewolf or here's a mummy, and it's actually been like a real werewolf and not just like an alien.
Tooth and Claw?
That was an alien.
Damn it. You're right. But I guess that's kind of like ties into this whole Moffat retrospective, which I guess we're also doing that. The Moffat era, I think, was like more science-based, I should say, than I think previous eras of the show. There was a lot more like technology used. There was a lot more sciencey explanations. Whereas like I think before Moffat, there was it was a lot more okay for the Doctor to be like, I just don't know what it was, and I'm just not going to explain like what happened there. Like, just not even going to explain it. And I think in the Moffat era, there was a tendency to explain like every week what was going on, basically. Like I am hard pressed to think of a story in the 12th Doctor's era or the Moffat era as a whole with. I know there's one or two, but where the Doctor was just like, yep, I don't know what happened, and we're just going to move on.
Sure.
And I think that's something that we do return to with Chibnall, especially since this whole next season is like there's no returning villains except for Resolution at the very end, where the Doctor, like, she has a moment where she's like, I literally just don't know what happened. Like, I don't know what that was.
Beats the heck out of me, and the credits roll.
But that's like, think about last week with Twice Upon a Time, right? Like, what Testimony was like, they just showed up and it was a very mysterious thing. You're like, oh, cool, it's gonna be mysterious. But then just halfway through the episode, they just info dump the entire history of Testimony, like literally the entire history of Testimony, like everything they've ever done. And they're just like, okay, it's just fully explained away now.
Yeah, I mean, there's something to be said for like withholding some information.
Yeah. Or again, with Twice Upon a Time, when we see Rusty, and like, would have been really cool if we just had no idea what Rusty's been up to. Like, we had no idea how he survived. But then the Doctor comes in, and you know what the first thing he says is, you've been killing Daleks for the last 200 years, and you've been pretty successful. Look at all these Dalek corpses all over the place. Like, it would have been cool if we could have just inferred that from the fact that, yeah, like, the first Doctor finds a Dalek eye stalk just sitting there.
Yeah, and there's also, I think, something to be said for like stories that let you kind of piece together the puzzle for yourself instead of just over-informing you type thing.
Definitely. I mean, I enjoyed the change, but I'm ready to go back to just not knowing what's going on. Like, I think both stories can be good, but I think right now I want to go back to just like something weird happens and like it's just not explained.
Sure.
It's kind of why I'm enjoying Children of the Stone so far, because it's like, just something weird's going on, and they're like, we don't freaking know what's going on, dude.
Well, it's like 6 episodes of that, and then the 7th episode is like the info dump episode.
Great. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I also kind of wanted to touch on the sound effects in this, because as like a non-comic reader, some of them were just hilarious to me. Like the TARDIS sound is apparently VWORP, spelled VWOORRRP, and that's consistent for every usage, for every time the TARDIS.
That's consistent outside of comics. When people write out the TARDIS sound effect, they've been using that for years.
Oh, well, never knew that, and it sounds wrong to me. Apparently, the sound of gunfire is pchow, PPTT-CHOW. Yep.
That's just great. That's just great.
And one last thing I kind of wanted to touch on, which I've been mentioning for the past couple of weeks actually, is this like anti-colonialism thing, which they actually bring up explicitly in this, where Ronnie questions whether the Doctor is part of like the British East India Company. He's like, no, I stand for everything that they don't stand for. Which is like, this in a way is a very colonial story in the sense that like the Doctor is from the future and he kind of knows like this society and stuff like that, and he's like their savior and he goes in to save the day and stuff.
Right.
And that's also a big part of like the colonial mindset is like the and I'm taking this from Edward Said, who's like not some theorist, he's like an extremely famous theorist, but like a big part of the colonial mindset is saying like, oh yeah, we, or like for example the British are our empire is now and it's going to extend into the future, whereas like for example the Egyptians or various Indian empires were in the past and they're not continuing now, which is like done in a weird time travel-y way here, where it's like the Doctor is from the future and he's accessing the past and kind of knowing all about them.
Right.
So just kind of wanted to bring that up because they mention it explicitly.
Well, Moffat also kind of like brought that to the forefront with the 11th Doctor when he was all like, the 11th Doctor had that whole like superiority savior complex to him. A good man goes to war. They're all like, you literally like, you just go and you like save whole species and races. Like you basically decide like who lives and who dies. And the 12th Doctor, there's that moment where he's just like, I'm an idiot. I'm just a guy in a box helping out. Like that's who I should be and that's who I am.
Yeah, it's actually funny that you mentioned that because that's actually one thing I wanted to kind of bring up is like the 12th Doctor very much, his era very much feels like a reflection on the 11th Doctor's era and kind of where the 11th Doctor was wrong. Because I feel like the 11th Doctor was portrayed as righteous in a lot of those types of scenes.
Right.
Whereas the 12th Doctor is kind of a reflection of like, is this really okay type thing.
Yeah, and that was a big, like, overarching plot for Series 8 especially, but lesser so with the other two, where the 12th Doctor was like, am I right to do this? Like, is it right that I keep doing this? And even at the end of his life, when he was dying, he was like, he basically says, like, it's time for me to die. Like, I want to die. It's time for me to stop doing this. But then, like, he sees the universe. He's like, yeah, I guess I'll get it all wrong without me. Which is, like, in some ways, like, a very touching moment. It's like, oh, the Doctor's deciding that the universe needs him. But also it's like, the Doctor deciding, yeah, he's the only one who can save the universe, right? But I think it's supposed to be this touching moment because it ties back to where Bill's telling the first Doctor, like, you run around the universe looking to see what holds it together and you don't realize that it's you.
Yeah. Oh, I do kind of like that in like the meta sense of like, all the people involved in this era letting go of Doctor Who as well, which I know we touched on that. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of why that hit home for me.
Well, it is a new era. We're about to enter the Chibnall era. The contemporary era. For the first time, we'll be contemporary.
Well, not for long.
Yeah.
Because they decided to release episodes very early in the year, which nobody expected. Or I didn't expect, at least.
Yeah, so... Yeah, I guess that's one of the things that we're still seeing, like how that's going to work out for Trust Your Doctor.
Yeah.
We're gonna run through Series 11, basically, and then we're going to see where we are in relation to the presumably currently airing Series 12 at that point. Although if it hasn't aired by the time we finish Series 11, then maybe we can do something. But we'll figure it out when we get there.
So do you kind of want to touch on like some favorites of the 12th Doctor's era? Favorite episodes, companions, etc.?
Yeah. Favorite companion, let's start there because it's like there's a 33% chance that we're going to pick the same one.
We got Clara, we got Bill, we got Nardole.
And I'm going with Bill. With Bill.
I think you know who I'm going with. And
Series
it's Clara.
8 Clara, yeah. Series 8 Clara.
No. Series 9 Clara and 7. But actually it's a little difficult for me because I do feel that Clara was at her strongest in Series 7
But Series 7 Clara is like more of a 11th Doctor companion.
Yeah, well she is totally an 11th Doctor companion. Which is why it's hard for me to choose between Clara and Bill here because I don't feel Clara was as strong. But at the same time, I still think I would go with Clara.
In many ways, though, I feel like Bill was more integral to the 12th Doctor's character. Clara was integral in her absence, in that her erasure from the Doctor's mind at the end of series 9 was like the most integral thing she does to the Doctor's character over the course of this 3-series arc.
Yeah, that's almost like modernist in a way. Of like the modernist movement in literature always focuses on like these characters who are at the fringes of the story or are completely absent from the story, but that have a huge effect on like the characters who are actually taking part in the the story or whatever.
Mm-hmm. I don't know. I just like Bill. I like her interplay with the Doctor more than Clara.
She. I would agree. She is more integral to just the overall story, and like I think it's both its plot and its themes, and the 12th Doctor as well.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm still not choosing her.
I also like Bill because like Clara and the Doctor's relationship was very toxic, which is like it's interesting to see, and like it makes for compelling television, but doesn't make Clara like a super likable character.
No.
Whereas Bill and the Doctor felt it felt like a very wholesome family. It felt like a family.
Sure.
But now we get the real fam with the 13th Doctor.
And her 3 companions.
Hey, we're going back to the 3-companion TARDIS that we always said was potentially the weakest possible TARDIS amount of people in the TARDIS.
But can also amount to like 5th Doctor Tegan Nyssa Turlough, which was great.
Yeah, because you had 3 amazing characters who all got their time in the sun, because you could very easily end up with like Stephen, Barbara, and Ian. Where Stephen is just there. Or Barbara, Ian, and Vicky. Where Vicky's just there. Or Barbara's just there.
Or you could end up with like season 7, 3rd Doctor, Danny Pink, what's her name? Perry.
Danny Pink, hang on.
This is a fantasy team.
Fantasy Doctor Who. Great. Why would you... No! Everything about that is bad. You could also end up with, like, Chameleon...
As the leader, not the Doctor. The Chameleon is the leader. But, like, you have some...
Prove me wrong. At least one episode out of those 4 has Chameleon portraying the Doctor. Prove me wrong. Prove me wrong.
Prove yourself right. You're the one saying it.
There's no way you can prove me wrong. No. There's literally no way you can prove me wrong.
He could just be like can Chameleon transform into like trees? He could just be like a blade of grass in the background or something.
I think it had to be a person, didn't it?
I don't know.
You can't prove me wrong. You have no idea what goes on behind those TARDIS doors off screen. You have no idea.
What if Chameleon was like impersonating the guy committing the crimes in Black Orchid? Wait, was Chameleon in...
Was Chameleon still in the TARDIS by the time Black Orchid came around? Or had he been introduced? I don't remember.
Well, he was introduced in the King's Demons, but I don't remember whether that was before or after Black Orchid. What if Chameleon was just like the villain in all of the stories that he was absent from?
He was the villain in King's Demons, and then he was the villain in Planet of Fire. You still have to wonder how intelligent it was of the Doctor to bring a robot built and controlled by the Master into the TARDIS.
Anyway, let's move on to favorite stories of the 12th Doctor's era.
Well, just right before we get there, on the topic of the Master, was there a reference to the Master in this comic where the Doctor mentions his old friend, or rather his old enemy, who tried to build an entire universe, and then the Doctor slipped in a couple negatives into his equations? Like, I was for sure thought this was a reference to Castrovalva.
Well, I don't know, because he pulls out a little marble, and he's like, yep, here's the little universe.
Yeah, that threw me off, because things like, you could still hear him screaming, and I'm like,
I mean, that's either an allusion to something else in the comic universe, or the Master. I don't see how it could be anything else.
Because I thought for sure it was a reference to Castrovalva when he mentioned it.
But then he pulls out the marble, and I was like, oh.
Yeah. Anyway, favorite stories. This is a tricky one for me.
Not for me.
All right, then you go first.
Under the Lake and Before the Flood is at the top for me.
That surprises me.
Not too hard of a decision.
That surprises me. I'm probably going to go with World Enough in Time and The Doctor Falls. It's tough between that and Flatline, if I'm being honest. Because I really like Flatline, like, a lot.
Which one was Flatline again?
The one with the boneless, the 2D monsters.
Oh, yeah. With, What was
Rigsy.
Rigsy?
It's one that introduced Rigsy.
Rigsy was cool. Even in his second appearance.
I guess. Should have chosen Rigsy as your favorite companion then.
Now, Rigsy was a companion to Clara, because she was the doctor, remember?
Right.
Yeah, I don't know if I have a least favorite story from this. There were definitely
Yeah, I
ones
was
that I
thinking
liked
about that.
lesser
It's
than
probably going to be
others.
Kill the Moon for me.
Yeah.
Even though when I watched it the second time, I liked it more than I did the first time. That happened for pretty much every story in the 12th Doctor's runs, so that still means it's the lowest.
I would probably... I don't think these are necessarily like bad or unenjoyable, but I would probably put Zygon Invasion Inversion or Mummy on the Orient Express as like my least favorites. Yep.
I don't think that's the thing, is that thinking about my least favorite, I don't think there's any story that I'm like, man, that was just a bad story. That was just terrible, like in every way.
No, and the 12th Doctor is one of the few Doctors that doesn't have like that one standout awful story, the 5th Doctor being the other notable example of that.
Well, yeah, I guess. I don't know about Black Orchid, though.
Black Orchid was great.
Fury
It's
from
true.
the... Not Fury from the Deep.
Oh yeah, never mind. The 5th Doctor does have
the
that.
one with the merca.
Yeah, never mind. I forgot about that one.
With the horse costume.
Yeah. I take it back. But yeah, no.
Seventh Doctor?
There was one Doctor who we said like didn't have a really bad story. It might have been the 6th.
No, the sixth had Time Lash.
Time Lash was good.
Sixth Doctor had the Twin Dilemma, which was...
Well, it isn't as bad as people say it is.
That doesn't mean it's not bad, though.
No, the 12th Doctor, I know I've been kind
Terror
of
of the Vervoids.
pretty good.
Actually, I liked Terror of the...
Yeah, it's pretty good. The 12th, I know I've been saying, like, is the 12th Doctor going to end up being my favorite? And, like, yeah, he's my favorite Doctor.
Yeah, he's mine. I really enjoy the character development, too, where he goes from this really gruff guy to this... Still serious, but, like, you can tell he's got a heart of gold underneath. Because, you know, I think the like, most obvious example of this is, you know, in his very first episode where Clara hugs him, he's like, I don't think I'm a hugger now. But then in his very final episode, like, he hears Bill's voice and he, like, runs down the corridor to give her a hug because he's so happy that she's alive.
Right. And that's kind of the thing we were touching on before of, like, that's never, like, something that's stated. It's just something you pick up on through, like, the visuals.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's no moment where they just go, yep, you've changed, Doctor. It just happens, like, in a very natural way.
Right.
Because, you know, there are moments in Series 9 where he's like, he wants to hug Clara, but he's like, I don't know if I want to. He's like, which is, like, already a change from the I'm not a hugger anymore
Yeah, so he goes from being a
Deep
germaphobe
breath.
to a not germaphobe. Great character. No, I'm kidding.
Well, he softens up a lot. I think Peter Capaldi also, like, portrays him very well. Like, it's a very understated, I think, portrayal.
Yeah, I would say so.
And he does it great. I just saw a Reddit thread yesterday that was like, man, I miss Capaldi. I feel bad for basically, like, hating on his era, but I miss him now that we're in the Chris
Wow.
Chibnall era.
Wow.
I'm like, you're basically just proving that theory I had that people just like to hate on whoever the showrunner is right now, and you should just do whatever you want, because in 5 years, people are like, damn, that was the greatest thing that's ever happened. Like The Frog, 10 years from now, they'll be like, that was the defining moment of modern Who.
Yeah, not even the showrunner, just everything new sucks. And everything that was old, no matter its quality, was great.
Yeah. People just yeah, but pretty much. That's why everybody's like, the massacre was the greatest thing ever. It's like, no, have you actually paid attention to the massacre? Have you actually, like, tried to sit through it? Ignoring Peter Purvis's self-aggrandizing, it's the best episode of Doctor Who because I basically the Doctor in that episode. Have you actually watched it?
Yeah. Yeah, well, with that, I don't really have anything more to say.
I don't have much more to say except that I'm really looking forward to getting Jodie Whittaker as the Doctor.
Yeah.
I'm really excited to rewatch these episodes again, because I remember enjoying them a lot on first watch and people being like, man, these episodes suck, and me being like, what are you talking about? I thought these episodes were great. So
Yeah, I know I've said this before, but I think one of the big things I'm looking forward to is seeing why this season is so hated and whether that's justifiable in
I
my
think
eyes
that
or
was
not.
part of like the excitement of going into the Moffat era too. Was like because right when we started the Moffat era, um, Chris Chibnall was just taking over, right?
Right.
And so the excitement was like, why do people hate the Moffat era so much? Like, why do people hate on Moffat himself so much and his writing? And like at the end of it, it's like, don't really think that was deserved.
No, especially because, and this was more true, I think, of the 11th Doctor's era, but I know, like, back when we started the Moffat era or had at least a few seasons under our belt, we were like, this is actually, at the end of the day, pretty similar to 2005 through 2010.
Right. Although I do think he's fairly criticized for overusing time travel in his stories, but he can do it well enough in time shows that it can be done well.
Yeah, you can't knock it out of the park every single time, you know. But and I think like you just said, Moffat is sometimes unfairly criticized for that, but because he has shown himself to be able to knock it out of the park with some scripts.
Yeah, I mean, and that's part of the reason why I think that sometimes he is fairly criticized for it, because he's shown that he can do it. So sometimes when he like phones it in, it's like, I know you could do better, Moffat. It's like I know you could have done this
all
better.
right, sure.
But a lot of the criticism I think he gets is unfair. That might be a controversial opinion. I think most of the criticism he gets is unfair, in fact. Mark Gatiss, too.
He doesn't do himself any favors, I'll say, in interviews, because like the few interviews I've seen with him, he comes across as like
Oh, well, I
having a
can't say anything
superiority
on that.
complex.
I can't say anything to that point.
I've only seen a few, but just comes off as like very egotistical sometimes.
Well, now I truly have nothing left to say. You can email us at thedoctor@decorativevegetable.com. Questions, comments, concerns, angry rants, love letters, your thoughts on Stephen Moffat, Murray Gold, Peter Capaldi. They're all leaving.
Terrorformer and the Swords of Kali, if you've read them.
Yeah, if you've read them. You can find us on Apple Podcasts. You can find us on YouTube at Decorative Vegetable. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and Spotify, all at Trust Your Doctor. Be sure to leave a rating if you like the show.
Check us out on Facebook, Trust Your Doctor. Like us on Facebook. Also check us out on Twitter at TYD Podcast and follow us on Twitter. And next time we'll be starting the 13th Doctor's era with The Woman Who Fell to Earth. But until then, the end.